we're ready to start the Fairisle portion of our knitting, so the pictorial part, the interesting thing, if you will. We finished 7 rounds so far. We did 6 in our rib, and then we did that increase round, if you remember. Now that increase round took us from an even number of stitches. We started with 58, and now we're on an odd number of stitches at 63. It's absolutely fine, except 63 being an odd number, we can't divide that evenly, so we cannot have an even number of stitches on the front and back needle. That is fine, and that is calculated, and that should happen because I want to have, we want to have that extra stitch, and let's look at why. So you can see that this side and this side of our pattern are absolutely equal. Okay, there's the same number of stitches, the pattern looks identical. You'll see that in your chart if you want to have a good old close-up look at it at home. And then we've got this bizarre thumb part going up the middle, which I said not to worry about because we're going to work that together and it's all going to become clear. But what's really easy to see is the thumb starts with just one blue stitch going right up the centre. Let me remind you of that. I showed you that before, but let me remind you of that on our sample. So if I turn this on the side, you can see that blue stitch goes all the way up. All right, it goes all the way up, and that is that blue stitch there, and it sort of goes up onto the thumb, so it's continuity right from the bottom all the way up to the top. So that is one extra stitch. That's where our odd number comes in. So we've got 31 stitches on here, 31 stitches on here, and 1 in the middle, and magically that adds up to 63, which is the amount of stitches we should have. So I'm going to choose to put that extra stitch on my front needle. So I've got 32 stitches on my front needle, so that will cover all of this plus my thumb, and I've got 31 stitches on the back needle, which will just cover this part here. Okay, so that's why it's uneven. It doesn't matter, it's not going to cause us any problems at all. Just choose where you want to put that stitch. I'm going to put it on the end of needle number 1. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to tell you. So we're going to be doing Fairisle, and Anna in her pattern has written some beautiful notes, very, very informative notes about Fairisle. But if you're like me and you're a bit of a visual learner, then you know, maybe watching the video and seeing it in action will help you, who knows. What I am going to do for this is I'm going to remove that stitch marker just so it's not in the way, because there's a lot of kind of close-up work to show you on that, so I'm going to take that off in a minute. But let's get right into it. We know that we're going to have to start working with an extra colour, that extra colour being the clay. We've already got the Seafarer attached to our yarn, to our work already, so it's just this guy who's going to be new in, and the new kid on the block. And obviously that is what's going to give us this lovely pattern, the contrast of 2 colours here. So it's a good time to talk to you about colour domination in a pattern. Now, whenever you work Fairisle, true Fairisle will work with 2 colours and 2 colours only on any one round. Okay, you can have multiple colours within a design, but any one round will only ever work a maximum of 2 colours. So when you're working 2 colours, you need to choose at outset which colour of those you want to be the dominant colour. And by dominant, let's have a little look at this mitten here. With this pattern, I think I would suggest that the dominant colour, so the colour that the pattern is popping out with, is the paler colour. That is the colour we want to really stand out to give us that pattern. We're sort of wanting the blue, the Seafarer, to fade back a little bit so we really see the contrast of these, like for example here, these lovely individual stitches, or the holly leaves, or whatever. So in our scenario, the pattern, the colour that we want to pop forward is the clay, and the pattern that we want to, the colour that we want to stay back a bit is the Seafarer. So that means I want to choose clay as my dominant colour. Now that is important going forward because that affects how we are going to hold the yarn and carry the yarn. Right, we're ready to go. As you know, the most of the first round is going to be in the clay colour, so I'm going to join in that clay now and get on with making a few stitches, and as we work along, the colour dominance that we talked about will come into play, and also carrying the yarn across the back of the work will come into play, because whilst the majority, let me get my pattern again, the majority of this first round is cream, we have got that blue stitch sat right in the middle. So I am going to need, when I get to here, which is where that blue stitch will sit, I'm going to need my blue yarn here to be able to work it. And the way I'm going to do that is by carrying it across the back of my work as I go. So let's have a look at all of that. As we do this, I want to also talk to you about the tension of stranded knitting or Fairisle knitting, because it does tend to be a little bit tighter once you start working with two colours. Just be mindful of that. Try not to pull everything too tightly. If you can't control it, you can very easily, what I usually do is go up a needle size, because I can't control it. But if you are not like me and are mindful, you can just not pull things too tightly. Okay, so I'm ready at round 1, stitch 1, and you can't see it too clearly on the camera because it's quite a long way away, but round 1 and stitch 1, bottom right corner there, is the lighter colour, and I'm going to do that for 31 stitches, I know, because I've counted them. So all I've done is I've put my needle in as if to knit, or ready to knit, and rather than working with the blue that is there, I'm going to put a loop of the new yarn round, which is the clay colour, and I'm going to knit that. And lo and behold, I have a clay stitch. Okay, and we've got a few ends here, but don't worry, we'll take care of them a little bit later. So I'm going to work 4 stitches, I think, 3 or 4 stitches, maybe 3. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to start bringing that blue with me. I do not want to get all the way across to stitch number 32 and have no blue to work. And this is where colour dominance comes in. The colour that is dominant, and we decided that's going to be the clay, I want it to always pass under the other colour. So when I'm carrying my blue across, I want my blue to go across the top. Can you see? Across the top of the clay. You can see the clay is coming underneath. And when I then go on to knit my next stitch, I'll do that now, in the clay, when I look over on the back, you can see, I'll try and neaten that up a bit, can you see here, this little loop right here, that is the yarn being carried along, or the float is what that is called, a float. In stranded or Fairisle knitting, that little loop that goes across the back is called a float. That is another thing that you do not want to be pulling too tight, because if you pull it too tight, the picture that you are creating will bunch up and you'll have kind of clumps of picture rather than a nice, smooth, even picture. So keep those stitches nicely spaced out along your needle as you work, and when you carry your yarn across the back, make sure you give it enough length that it can sit across the back in a loop without being too tight. Can you see if I just turn it like that? You can see that loop is fairly loose. There's a bit of daylight through it. That is perfectly fine. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on doing this. Now I am doing this in no particular special way. I am throwing my yarn, so English method, and that is working perfectly well. So if you are a person that is happy working like this, not a problem at all. And I must admit, I do vary how I work my Fairisle, because sometimes I work in a slightly different way, and I'm going to show you that right now. So the way that Anna describes in her pattern is holding the dominant yarn, so we know our dominant yarn is clay, the pale colour, holding that in the left hand and knitting that in the continental style. I'm trying to do this and unravel, and I'm going to show you how to do that. First of all, what it will involve is having 2 balls of yarn on opposite sides of me, and I'm just going to try and get that so you can see that on camera. On the left, the dominant yarn, I'm going to ultimately be holding that in my left hand, so I'm going to keep that ball over on the left, and on the right, the sea fairy yarn, which is going to be the non-dominant colour, and I'm going to work that in the normal way, throwing the yarn as I have been. Okay, so what does that look like? Okay, well, let's look at that. This is trickier to master, but certainly worth the effort, because you will knit much more evenly and quickly actually using this method. So can you see I'm just holding my clay yarn, the dominant yarn, in my left hand. I've got it tensioned around my fingers. If you're a crocheter, this is going to possibly come a little more naturally. And I'm holding the right yarn in the normal way around my right fingers. Okay, so what does that look like in terms of actually knitting a stitch? If you're not somebody that knits continental, this is going to be completely new to you. It was completely new to me, and it does, I will not lie, take a bit of practice. Likewise, if you're a continental knitter, this is going to be absolutely peculiar to you and take a bit of getting used to. So, you know, give and take, people, we can get there. So I want to knit using my dominant yarn. As we know, we're going to go all the way along in the cream, or the clay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle in as if to knit, and I'm actually going to pick the yarn. Can you see the needle goes right over the yarn and kind of helps it through and off the end? All right, let's do that one more time. All the time I'm worrying about this because I need to carry this along. So I'm just going to show you a picking stitch one more time, and then we'll worry about carrying that yarn across. So needle in as if to knit, needle goes over the top of the yarn, all right, and then it's pulled through and goes off the end of the needle, and you've created your stitch. Whichever method you choose, whether you choose to hold both yarns and throw them, or attempt to do the continental and in left hand and English in the right hand, stick to it. Don't chop and change, because it will change your tension. Okay, maybe do a practice piece. I don't know, whatever you want to do. This is a great method to learn if you possibly can, so let's kind of stick with this. Okay, so I'm a little bit overdue carrying this yarn over, but not to worry, this is just a practice. How would I do that and not let go of all of this, because I've kind of just got everything tensioned and it's working well. I don't want to let go of everything. I just want to sort of get on and carry on knitting, really. Well, the good news is there's a very easy way to do it. So I need to be knitting with this clay, but I need to be carrying the Seafarer. So what I'm going to do is I've got my needle in as if to knit, and I'm actually going to wrap the Seafarer around the needle. Hang on a minute, that looks like I'm going to make a blue stitch. No, we're not done yet. I am then going to put my needle under the clay, ready to kind of pull through in that continental style as before, and then I'm going to let go or unwrap the Seafarer again, so it's not on the needle anymore. I've let it go. If I finish my knitting stitch, my continental knitting stitch, you can see very clearly cream, is it, or clay? I keep calling it clay, you know what I mean, it's very clearly clay. And when I turn over, there's that loop. Look, can you see it? This Seafarer has looped all the way along the back, just where we want it. It's caught in nicely, it's not going anywhere, and we haven't had to let go of anything. So I'm going to do a few more stitches in the continental way. 1, 2, 3. And I'm now going to do that little sort of nifty manoeuvre again. So I'm going to knit as if I'm going to knit with the blue. Then I'm going to put my clay over the top, let the blue go again. Okay, I love that. It's like magic. It's really like magic. So a little bit more. The other thing that works beautifully using this method is, have you noticed how my yarns are totally separate? You saw at the beginning there me unravelling and untangling and yapping away while I was trying to do that, because my yarns were completely tangled. When you work in this method, they never meet. They never meet, so you can rattle along without any stopping at all, but to unravel, because they don't ever ravel. It's fantastic. So give this method a practice if you can. All right, so picking continental and throw it with the left and the dominant colour. Always going to be clay in this scenario. So picking continental and carrying Seafarer as our non-dominant one. Right, I've now worked 31 stitches in cream. Let's have a little look at our, sorry, clay, oh my goodness. I've worked all of that and I'm here. ready for that blue. And because we've done the work, we've put the effort in, blue is there, it's ready to go. It is there's no reach, nothing to worry about. I can make that blue stitch dead easy. So let me go, apart from I've just dropped my needle. But if I was holding my needle properly. So now all I've got to do is go ahead and make the blue stitch. And because of the way I am holding, that blue yarn automatically went across the top of the clay, which means that our dominant colour is unaffected. It's always going to be, it's not a problem on this particular row of the round of the knitting because it's not creating a pattern, but when we get up here and we're creating a pattern, it will make a difference. We do want it to pop, so we do want to be very mindful of where we are holding those yarns. So we have finished the first half of our mitten, or the front half. I'm going to make this the front half. This is a good time, a very good time actually, to talk about these mittens very quickly. They are totally identical. So you will knit two mittens in an identical way because the front and the back are absolutely identical. So you will wear your right one like that, and when you turn it over, there's your left one. So there's no messing around with having to reverse thumb placements or anything like that. So it's truly fabulous. Thank you, Anna, for that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to refer back in my brain to our magic loop knitting, turn everything around, get ready to go, to get ready to carry on. So on my pattern I am now here, and again helpfully on this row it is all clay, so not too much to worry about. Everything happens in exactly the same way, that is to say I'm going to hold clay on the left and seafarer on the right. Right, I am now ready to start on the second side of the mitten, and we know, just because we do, that this particular round is all clay. With we've got no more blue to work because we've gone beyond that one. We're now just going here to the end and it's all clay, but we do need to carry the blue along because at the beginning of the next round we've got some blue, so keep carrying that yarn round. Now at this point I want to tell you that I always carry my yarn to the first stitch in the needle, so even if it's not used for say 3 or 4 stitches, I still like to trap it in at the very beginning of each needle. It just stops any pulling when you've kind of taken them off the needles and you're working in the round. So just as before, I'm going to take the blue around the top of the needle and I'm going to pick the yarn through from clay in the normal way. So I'm carrying on with my continental, 1, 2, 3, let's do the 4th stitch I'm going to carry. So yarn round, pick, yarn back, and off I go. So what we've learned on this round is we've learned how to carry the non-dominant yarn. Okay, when we come back in another couple of rounds, I'll find one where you need to carry your dominant yarn and I'll show you how to do that. We don't need to do that right at this moment, but that one's even easier. So I'll show you that when we get there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work my way along to the end of this row, and I think what we'll do is we'll work the next row because it is truly working 2 colours, and then I'll make my way to a row where we've got to do a bit of carrying of the dominant yarn. Okay, so I will just see you at the end of this row.